Joining us now, first Senator John McCain. Senator, I understand that when Vicki Kennedy began calling people to speak at the wake on Friday night, that you were the first Republican that she called, and I can understand why that was, because you did have a very kind of special relationship with Senator Kennedy. You didn't always work together. A lot of the time you were on opposite sides, but somehow you managed to keep this relationship going. How did you do that?
I think it was probably because, first of all, we grew to respect each other, and over time then have great affection for each other. You know, in this business, first you got to establish respect, and that respect sometimes was because of face-to-face discussions, sometimes not for the record, on issues that we had disagreements on. But the thing about Ted was that when the debate was over, then he put his arm around you and you moved on to the next issue. He never held not only didn't hold a grudge, he would, that was done. Now let's go on to the next battle.
You know, I talked to Bob Dole on the day Senator Kennedy died, and I asked him basically the same question I asked you, and he said he had this ability to go out there on the floor and make these highly partisan speeches, but somehow leave the impression that he wasn't talking about you personally.
About you. That's right. But the other thing that I think was so important about Ted, the reason, one of the fundamental reasons for his success was once he gave his word, that was never broken. And I'd love to tell you that that's a very common thing, but unfortunately it's not as common as we would like. And he would even take votes that were counter to his own position in order to preserve the coalition that he had fashioned in order to reach a goal. When we were working on immigration reform, when he saw some of his members straying, he would give them a little straight talk, and he would take votes that would look like they were counter to his position, but were vital to preserving the fragility of any coalition. Whenever you're going to pass major legislation, you've got to have a coalition, and you've got to preserve it when you're on the floor. And the enemies are always looking for amendments that will split that coalition. But the other thing is, you know, he was an affectionate man. He really enjoyed his friends. I wasn't nearly the close friend that Chris Dodd, for example, was, and others. But I saw the genuine affection that he held for his staff, for his friends. We all know how devoted he was to his family. Anybody who saw Ted Kennedy Jr.'s statement yesterday had to be genuinely moved by the devotion that this father had to his children and his family. When Russ Feingold and I got the Profile and Courage Award, I saw him with the whole family, all the kids, grandkids. He truly was the patriarch, and he kept that family together.
I want to ask you, since you're here, I asked you here to come talk about Senator Kennedy, but this morning on Fox, former Vice President Cheney said that the the administration's decision to appoint a special counsel to look into the torture allegations was, in his words, a terrible decision. He said, and these were his words, "It offended the hell out of me." I know you were against torture and tried to do something about that, but do you agree with the Vice President, the former Vice President, that somebody should not have been appointed to look into this?
I believe that the President was right when he said we ought to go forward and not back. I worry about the morale and effectiveness of the CIA. I worry about this thing getting out of control and us harming our ability to carry on the struggle that we're in with radical Islamic extremism. So, look, I was radically opposed to it. I think it harmed us. I think torturing harmed us. I had a number of anecdotes that could substantiate that, and I think it harmed our image in the world. But for us now to go back, I think would be a serious mistake.
The president had said that he wanted to go forward, but this apparently is a decision made by the Attorney General, and the president, I guess, says he's going to go along with it.
Well, the Attorney General has a unique position in the cabinet. Obviously, he can't be told what to do by the President of the United States, but I think it's a mistake. I think in the future we'll find out it's a mistake. And at the same time, we can assure the American people that it will never happen again, and people in the world that has harmed our image so badly.
Do you agree with the Vice President when he says this has kept the country safe all this time since this attack, and it is because these interrogations worked and we found out information that helped us keep the country safe?
I think the interrogations were in violation of the Geneva Conventions and the Convention Against Torture that we ratified under President Reagan. I think that these interrogations, once publicized, helped al-Qaeda recruit. I got that from an al-Qaeda operative in a prison camp in Iraq who told me that. I think that the ability of us to work with our allies was harmed, and I believe that information, according to the FBI and others, could have been gained through other methods.
When you say an al-Qaeda operative told you it helped them, what do you mean?
I was in Senator Lindsey Graham and I were in Camp Bucca, the 20,000 prisoner camp. We met with a former high-ranking member of al-Qaeda. I said, how did you succeed so well in Iraq after the initial invasion? He said two things. One, the chaos that existed after the initial invasion, there was no order of any kind. And two, he said, Abu Ghraib pictures allowed me and helped me to recruit thousands of young men to our cause. Now that's al-Qaeda. And the second thing about it is, if you inflict enough pain on anyone, they'll tell you anything to make the pain stop. So you not only get perhaps right information, but you also get a lot of wrong information. But the damage that it did to America's image in the world is something we're still on the way to repairing. This is an ideological struggle as well as a physical one.
Well, Senator McCain, thank you so much for coming by to share those stories about Senator Kennedy and also about comments on the news of the day.
Thank you for having me on, Bob.
Okay. I want to go now to Boston, where Senator Dianne Feinstein, who served with Senator Kennedy on the Judiciary Committee, is standing by. Also with us this morning from Portland, Maine, Congressman Barney Frank, who is from Senator Kennedy's home state, of course, Massachusetts. Senator Feinstein, let me just start where Senator McCain left off, this whole controversy where you have the Vice President now saying that he thought it was a terrible decision driven by politics for the Attorney General to appoint a special counsel to look into these charges of torture. We'll talk about Senator Kennedy in just a minute, but since you are on Judiciary, I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, really, my thoughts as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, I think, is what is probably most relevant. I have read the 2004 Inspector General report, which is a stunning report, and I've read it in its unredacted version. And it's true, I was horrified, so I understand the Attorney General's reaction. However, I think the timing of this is not very good. The Intelligence Committee has underway now a total look at the interrogation and detention techniques used for all of the high-value detainees. We're well along in that study, and I'm trying to push it along even more quickly at this time. We are not going to be deterred from completing this study, and candidly, I wish that the Attorney General had waited. Every day something kind of dribbles out into the public arena. Very often it has mistakes. Very often it's half a story. And I think we need to get the whole story together and tell it in an appropriate way. A lot of things are being said. Well, torturing people is something that we did, but on the other hand, it produced all kinds of incredible information. It did produce some information, but there is a great discrepancy and I think a good deal of error out there in what people are saying it did produce. And we need to straighten that out. And the only thing that's going to straighten it out is a very comprehensive look at it This is a bipartisan effort of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and it should be able, we should be able to finish it, hopefully not too long from now.
So let's, let me thank you very much. And let me ask you now about Senator Kennedy. You were at the funeral yesterday. You served on the Judiciary Committee a long time with Senator Kennedy. You were not there during the Bork hearings when Senator Kennedy said some very tough things. I mean, the thing we always remember is the quote he gave where he said, "Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back alley abortions, blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters, rogue police could break down citizens' doors in midnight rage, children could not be taught about evolution." Many people said that after Senator Kennedy said that the whole confirmation process about Supreme Court candidates changed after that. Do you think that was a good part or a bad part of his legacy?
Well, I'm not going to put it that way because I wasn't there. I do think that the process has changed. I do think it's become much more partisan. And there are many of us on that committee that are trying very hard to end that kind of partisanship. I was very surprised, for example, when Justice Sotomayor was not confirmed by more Republicans on the committee than voted for her, because I thought she was just a sure thing and a great American story and very well qualified. And this, in fact, was an historic nomination because she would have been the first Latina ever to sit on the United States Supreme Court. But what was so amazing about Senator Kennedy was this. He truly had a civil rights, anti-discrimination, human rights agenda that was deep in his heart. And he led the committee, I believe, in social issues. And he had worked on them for years. He cared deeply. He was a robust subcommittee chair. He controlled the subcommittees. He put together legislation. He lobbied it through. When he needed to compromise, he compromised. But he was a very dominant figure on that committee. And when he spoke, everybody listened. There was no question to that. So he's a leader.
A leader.
And a great leader.
Let me bring in Barney Frank, because that brings me to another part of it. We were just talking to Senator McCain, talking about how he was able to maintain these relationships. But as a Democrat, Congressman Frank, from his home state, what do you think it was that made him so successful? What Senator McCain has said over the years, our most effective member of the Senate?
Three things, Bob, one of which we talked about. Let me start with two others. First of all, he knew his stuff. Ted Kennedy hired consistently the smartest and best minds that he could get. He went into any negotiation knowing the substance better than almost anybody. And you know, as Senator Feinstein knows, particularly if you're a United States Senator, you're on several committees and subcommittees, and your ability to stay on top of things, it can be hard. Members of the House, the same thing. We're too much staff-driven at some of what we do. Ted Kennedy had a first-rate staff, and he mastered that material. He did his work. And so when Ted Kennedy sat down, he knew things. And knowing your material is important. Secondly, he was a very good politician. We're talking about politics. He knew the way to negotiate was the best thing you could do was maybe something will be important to the other guy that's not so important to you, and it'll be important to you and not so important to her, and that's the way you put it together. But there's a final thing that we talked about, and it relates to what Senator Feinstein said about the nominations. We're getting more polarized in America today. I wish more people were watching programs like this, you know, a lot of us do, because what you have now is there's not the common body of information out there for the most active people politically. The most conservative people are listening to talk radio. People on the left tend to be on the internet. They don't have enough knowledge of what other people think. They tend to, frankly, listen to media, the most active people, that reinforce their own views. The problem there is that if you then want to make a compromise, which is essential for almost anything, particularly since we've had a de facto amendment to the U.S. Constitution, so 60 votes instead of 51 is needed for the Senate, very unusual in our history, it's hard to do that because the people who make the compromises will be accused by their own ideological partisans of giving in for no good reason. If we say to them, look, we didn't have the votes to do this, They say, oh, but everybody I talk to on the internet, everybody who calls into this talk show, they agree with me. What helped Ted Kennedy was this. No one could attack him from the left. You might disagree with him on a specific issue, but as Senator Feinstein said, look at his agenda. No one in American history has done more to advance the cause of fairness in our country, economically, socially, and every other way. So Ted Kennedy had the ability and the knowledge to get into a political situation and make the compromises, and he knew that there might be some people who might be unhappy with this one or that one, but no one was going to credibly say, oh, Ted Kennedy sold us out for no good reason. And that's an essential thing if you're going to have the ability to make deals.